when you think about what a superintendent does, it really is about creating stability. That's it. Actually, that's not it, but that's the fundamental. The fundamental purpose of a superintendent is to create stability. So let me explain that for just a moment and get real serious about this. There's no way to optimize a project unless we first stabilize that project. So superintendents are there to create an environment where all of the trade partners can be successful. And that comes from stability. They know what to do. They just need to know what and when to do it within a stable system. And you'll have A, B, C, D player contractors on your site. They all need to be elevated to perform well so that the A players on your project site are not de-incentivized. We have to make sure that our projects are operationally excellent. And it's a whole lot more like war than we probably would want, but I'll just be real honest with you and say that's kind of how it is. If you want to be a great superintendent, then you'll learn how to lead like some of the best military generals of history. I really like using General Patton for an example of what to do and what not to do. General Patton was arguably one of the most successful military commanders in United States military history. And even if there's controversy with that, it's true. Like Hitler in World War II feared Patton more than any of the other American generals because he knew what he was doing. Now, also, if you've seen the movie Patton, I think it was the 1970s movie with George C. Scott. If you watch that movie, you'll also know that Patton slapped 2 soldiers and got put in the doghouse for misconduct and for saying things that he shouldn't have, which were politically incorrect. Some of them were accurate. They came to pass in years later, but he got in trouble because he wasn't fitting into the mold of someone who was socially acceptable. And yet, Patton was one of the main drivers in us winning on the European battlefield in World War II. And I'm going to ask you this question. So think about it. Why was he so successful? Why was he, as a military commander, so successful? Well, when the American forces first started into the war and they started to fight in Africa and then up the Mediterranean coast and they started to work their way towards Italy, the Americans got whooped. Like, we got our butts kicked, like handed to us. And I'm not making light of it because there was like over 1,500 people that died in one of those first battles. It was devastating. And General Bradley was dispatched by Eisenhower to assess the situation, and they determined that they needed the best tank commander, the best military tank commander that they had available, and that was General Patton. And he happened to be, I think he was in Morocco. Yeah, he was in Morocco at the time, and so he was summoned to go over there, and he came in with all of the fanfare. And in that famous 1970s movie, you can see him going around and whipping people into shape. And so he was talking to General Bradley in his headquarters, incidentally, right after he had gotten his 3rd star as a 3-star general. And he said, "You know why we lost? Why our boys got our butts kicked? It's because they didn't act like soldiers, they didn't talk like soldiers, they didn't train like soldiers, they didn't practice like soldiers. And in 15 minutes, we're going to turn these boys into a bunch of razors, fanatics. They'll lose their fear of the Germans, but I hope to God they'll never lose their fear of me." And so he immediately started to order standard military salutes and dress and times when you could access the cafeteria. They would be properly uniformed. They would practice. They would drill. They would practice how they wanted to play. Everything was put into order. Everything was put into stability. Everything was systematized. And when Patton started to engage with the Axis forces, I'm losing my edge here. So when he started to engage with the Nazis, He won against Field Marshal Erwin Rommel and other Nazi commanders. He won against them because he was more disciplined. He was more stable. He had a better fighting machine. Those boys, those American soldiers, were razors, fanatics. They practiced hard. They drove hard. They thought like soldiers. They acted like soldiers. They always wore their helmets. So that's really why they started to win. And in fact, when Patton was in control of the Third Army, he was going to drive all the way into Berlin and kill Hitler himself. And you'll never guess, well, you probably can guess what happened. He outran his fuel supply lines. Those boys that were under his command worked so hard because they were in a stable environment. And so that's the role of a superintendent. And there's a lot more to it. You've got daily reports, you've got scheduling, you've got all of these different things that you have to do, especially in the dirt world, right? The role of a superintendent isn't easy. You may have 3 or 4 different projects, but I promise you, if you are trying, and I use the word try as a powerless word, if you are trying to optimize that project before you stabilize that project, then you're not living and executing in the role of a superintendent. So the first topic that I'm going to cover in this video is about personal organization. And I also covered this with the foreman videos. I hope you got to watch those. But you have to have a personal organization system. You have to keep a to-do list. And I'll summarize this, and I won't take up too much of your time, but here's where the rubber meets the road. If you do this, you will win. You will win over and over and over. And if you don't, you will not win. So you can leave this video, you can pay the money that it took or watch it for free, however you got to it. You can do whatever you want. But if you don't implement this, nothing will change for you on the project side. You first have to start with yourself. Everything goes on a to-do list. Everything. There's nothing that should be left in your head. Anything that somebody tells you, anything that you remember, anything that you know you should do, everything comes out of your head. That's how it goes. It's captured. And then it goes into the right buckets. That bucket could be a meeting agenda, your personal to-do list. It could go into an email out as a delegated assignment. And everything should be filtered into a couple of categories. And this is called the Eisenhower Method. So it's kind of funny that we gave you a World War II example. General Eisenhower was one of the most successful American military commanders from an organization standpoint. He led as the Supreme Allied Commander, a 5-star general over the European theater. He led those forces, the Allied forces, to success. And he used what's called the Eisenhower Method or the Eisenhower Matrix. And so if you look, there were a couple of columns: urgent, not urgent, important, not important. And where the urgent and important intersected, he would do those tasks right away. Where the important and the not urgent items would intersect, those are things that we should plan. And where the important and the not urgent, right, or the not important and the urgent intersected, that would be delegate to somebody else. And if it was not urgent and not important, we scratch that. We're not doing that. So you have to triage, you have to prioritize everything that comes into your system, and then you have to act on it. And what I want all of you to do, all addictions aren't bad, right? Drug addictions are bad, right? Alcoholism can be very bad. Certain other addictions can be bad, but an addiction to your personal organization system can be good. When you complete a task and you cross that off your list, your brain will release chemicals, hormones that will get you addicted to that activity. They're called habit loops. There's a fantastic book called The Power of Habit. There are triggers, the habit loop, and then the reward cycle that says, yes, this was good. If you get used to that, get everything out of your head and onto paper, you are destined to win, at least in certain proportions. So that then gets translated, and I want you to write this down, into what's called leader standard work. That means you should have a plan every week, week in and week out. What are the things that I do as a leader according to where I want to go in my career? Remember, in the foreman training videos, you should have clarity, the right mindset, personal organization, and a morning routine. Okay? So your leader standard work is the distilling down of your 20%. We talked about that. Your 20%, that's the 20-80 rule, sometimes called the Pareto principle, that 20% of your activities will have 80% of your return. They will yield 80% of your return. You need to find out what your 20% is as a superintendent, and you need to make sure you're doing that weekly. And that becomes your weekly, Monday through Friday, leaders' standard work. A superintendent, you might have things on there like mentor assistant superintendents, plan the week, do the weekly work planning meeting, lead the foreman huddle, be in the drawings every day, study the drawings, do a reflection walk, be in the schedule. There are things that you have to do day in and day out that will drive your success. And then every day, I'm challenging you to come in and to distill it down what from your to-do list needs to be done that day, to time block that into your day and follow your plan, and then to track whether or not it's working. There has never been, with the hundreds of superintendents that I've been around and that I've taught, and I've taught hundreds. I've been all over the country. I've even been to Europe. Out of all of them, I have never seen a successful superintendent that didn't have a good personal organization system. So if you want to create stability on the job, you create stability with yourself first. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And so if you remember that, you have to start there first. Your mind is for having ideas, not for holding them. Your life is for engaging in the most important things, your 20%, and you have to track to see that that's working so that you can live a remarkable life and lead with stability in every other aspect of your career.